Alright, it's time to talk about something that most people don't want to think about. Getting old. And not just in the, oh no, I found a grey hair kind of a way. I mean how you so often become invisible, ignored and lonely, that kind of old. And a great example of this is in Japan, a country known for its longevity, where some elderly women are committing petty crimes just to get locked up. Why? Because in prison, they get food, shelter, healthcare, and perhaps more importantly, company. This isn't just a problem for Japan, this is a global crisis that says a lot about how we treat our aging population. And spoiler alert, we're doing a terrible job. Before we begin, we post death and dying related videos every Friday, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk the elder loneliness epidemic. Japan has one of the highest proportions of elderly people in the world, with nearly 30% of the population over 65, retirement age. And for many of them, life isn't exactly golden years of bliss. Multi-generational homes becoming a thing of the past. Community support limited. Financial security a distant dream for many. For some elderly women, prison becomes their retirement plan, which sounds extreme, right? But when you think about it, you can see why. 3 meals a day, medical care, people to talk to, things that they struggle to get on the outside. Over 80% of elderly women jailed in Japan have committed minor crimes like shoplifting. And many of them are repeat offenders, not because they're hardened criminals, but because they literally don't know where else to go. Take for example Toshiko, a 78-year-old woman who was caught stealing rice and fruit. She lived alone, no family, no visitors, and struggled to afford food. After her release, she found herself in the exact same situation, so she stole again, just to go back inside. Then there's Kato, 81, arrested for stealing lipstick. Not because she needed it, but because she wanted human interaction. When prison feels like a better option than freedom, we have a serious problem. I mean, the Japanese even have a word for a lonely death. It was a phenomenon first described in the 80s of people dying alone and remaining undiscovered for a long period of time. And it's become even more common as time has gone on, attributed to economic troubles and Japan's increasingly elderly population. Loneliness and aging, a global issue. Now, before you think, oh, well, that's just Japan, let's zoom out a bit. This isn't just a Japanese issue. Across the world, the elderly are becoming more isolated. The way society is set up, once you retire, you gradually disappear. Your work friends, gone. Your sense of purpose, fading. Family, often too busy. And if you're not tech savvy, well, good luck keeping up with everyone's lives. Health issues make things worse. Mobility problems, chronic illnesses, and cognitive decline all make it harder to stay socially active. There are community programs out there, but they're often underfunded and underutilized. So elderly loneliness isn't just sad, it's systemic. The global elderly population is growing at an unprecedented rate. In 2020, there were 1 billion people aged 60 or over. By 2030, that number is expected to jump to 1.4 billion, meaning 1 in 6 people will be 60 or older. Or, in another word, 1 in 6 will be post-retirement age. Looking ahead to 2050, the projection doubles to 2.1 billion seniors. The 80-plus crowd is growing even faster, with their numbers set to triple from 2020 to 2050, reaching 426 million. And this isn't just a phenomenon for wealthy nations. By 2050, 2/3 of the world's elderly will live in low to middle income countries. Countries like Japan are already feeling the effects, with 28% of their population aged 65 or above, the highest in the world currently. But this trend is not unique to Japan. In 2022, people aged 65 and above made up nearly 10% of the global population. By 2050, that's expected to rise to 16%. These numbers aren't just statistics, they're a wake-up call. An aging population will impact economies, healthcare systems, and social structures worldwide. But before you put all the blame on the government, because I know that will happen in the comments, let's just take a look inwards for a second. Hi folks! In case you didn't see our video last week, a heads up that we now have a Patreon if you would like to support the channel further. This is all very new, so we would really appreciate the feedback on it, which is easy to do by simply writing it in a comment under one of our videos or emailing us. The email address and the link to our Patreon are in the description. And of course, a like and subscribe to the channel is always appreciated. Now, back to the video. The rise of ageism and its impact. Here's the thing, throughout history, elders were respected as the wise ones, the storytellers, the knowledge gatekeepers. But in modern society, not so much. Ageism is one of the last acceptable forms of discrimination. If someone said, "I just don't like women," or "I find disabled people annoying," there'd be an outrage. But replace that with, "Old people are so slow and boring," no one bats an eye. There's no social media outrage, and that's the problem. How often do you interact or give time to your grandparents or elderly neighbours? Go out of your way to have a coffee and a chat with them? And this meme sums up a lot, so let that sink in. And I know there will be comments under this video from people trying to dismiss the issue, saying, "Well, my grandparents are arseholes. Like, not everyone has nice old people around them." You know damn well that you are deliberately skirting around the bigger issue here and trying to play the victim so you don't have to participate in problem solving of societal issues. Stop it! Because when we don't respect or value the elderly, we don't prioritise their needs. Society focuses on the majority, dismissing the older generation as an afterthought. But guess what? The world's population is aging fast. Soon the elderly won't be a minority, they will be a massive chunk of society. And if we don't start making changes now, today's young people will just be the next generation of neglected, lonely seniors. Medical students. Now let's talk about another big reason the elderly get overlooked: healthcare. More specifically, the fact that a lot of young doctors don't want to work with them. This was a frustrating part of my recent research project. Geriatric medicine isn't seen as exciting, prestigious, or particularly profitable. Medical students are more drawn to fields like surgery or cardiology, where the money and status is higher. Some even admit that they find the elderly patients boring or frustrating because they take longer to treat, have chronic conditions, and struggle with memory. But guess what happens when we don't have enough specialists who care about geriatric medicine? The elderly get stuck with doctors who aren't trained, or worse, doctors who just don't care. And that only makes their neglect and loneliness worse. The medical community wants to ensure everyone lives longer, but don't want to deal with the issues that creates. Addressing the issue of elderly loneliness. So what's the solution? It's going to take a combination of social, political, and cultural change. We need better programs, more intergenerational interaction, and a serious rethinking of how we treat older adults. We need to close the digital divide so seniors can stay connected. We need to encourage volunteer programs that match young people with elderly companions. We need to see the elderly as human beings with feelings, thoughts, needs, and wants. Most importantly, we need to start treating aging like a normal, valuable part of life, instead of something to be ignored until it happens to us personally. This takes a psychological shift in all of us as individuals. So here's a personal story for you. When I was 21, I was helping my mum for the day look after my grandma who was in her 80s. Mum said grandma had a list of things that she needed to do at the shops. Now, I'm someone who writes a lot of lists and get frustrated when I don't manage to do those things. I figure, what's the point of writing a list otherwise? But being in your early 20s with a brain that hasn't quite fully developed yet, you don't quite understand the other end of life's brain deterioration. So I was getting frustrated that my grandmother was taking so long to get ready, because I'm thinking we're not going to have enough time to get everything done. And it wasn't until my mum stopped me and told me that when my grandmother and us write a list of things to do, our goal isn't to complete the list. It doesn't matter if we don't complete it. Instead, we use the list as a reason to leave the house. Our goal was for Grandma to be able to get dressed presentable as she would like, to get her to walk to the car, to see the world outside her home. When we got to the shops, our goal was to make sure she ate a full meal by taking her to her favourite cafe, and having her interact with other people like the cafe staff, and tick off maybe one of the things on the list, perhaps choosing a birthday card for a friend. The goal was companionship, getting her brain and body moving, ensuring she was fed and showered, giving her dignity to be presentable as she would like, and helping her be part of the community. And once I understood that, it stuck with me going forward. And I don't think many people get that wake-up call, or understanding how frustrating it is for many elderly people when they forget things or can't move as fast as they'd like. Because those things sneak up on you. One day your knee goes out in your 30s. How did that happen? One day you find your first grey hair in your 40s. Where did that come from? You didn't ask for these things to happen. They just happen because that's aging. It's the same deal with everything else that leads up to you being in your 80s. So when you're interacting with someone who's in their 80s and you're getting frustrated because they're not understanding or moving quick enough, slow down. Realize they aren't doing it deliberately and it is just as infuriating for them, if not more. The fact that elderly women in Japan are committing crimes just to get locked up should be a wake-up call. This isn't about crime, it's about how we're failing our aging population. Loneliness amongst the elderly is a worldwide crisis driven by changing family dynamics, economic struggles, and deep-rooted ageism. On top of that, medical professionals are turning away from geriatric medicine, making the situation worse. And if we don't start addressing this now, we are all going to be part of the same cycle when we get older. And we will get older, if we're lucky. The question is, do we want to be part of a society that values its elderly, or one where people would rather go to prison than be alone? The choice is ours. So next time you see an elderly person struggling with their groceries or sitting alone at a cafe, don't just walk past and ignore them. Engage, listen. Because the way we treat our elderly today is a direct reflection of the kind of future that we're building for ourselves. And with that, go talk death.